Yeah, so my dad was really the rock of the family during everything. He was really consistent. It was interesting because his background, he started as a farm boy, so he was rock solid. I mean, the guy was solid muscle. From there, after college, he started working for Shell. He was one of their top engineers for years, an incredibly smart guy. And then he quit Shell to start building custom homes. That's where he and I ended up working together. Mom worked with us too. She was the decorator. I ran the job sites for him. But he liked to be really physically involved, so that kept him in really good shape. And so, he wasn't that tall. He was only about 5'10", but he had like a big barrel chest and a grip like a freaking vice.
But I was, in a way, kind of a tough individual because I had to be in my business. But on the other hand, I was really rather mild with people until something like this happens.
So when I first decided to write this story, I gave a copy when I did the first draft of it. It was an earlier version. It was a long, long time ago. It was a really terrible version of the book. I gave it to Dad to read. And, I asked his opinion of it, asked him what he thought. And it was interesting because he told me how it affected him.
Yes, it had an impact on me, as a matter of fact. I was telling you the other day that after I read the book, I put away my computer and made sure all the doors were locked in the house. And actually, I was a little bit more careful outside. I even went outside and locked my truck, which I don't normally do. But it had been a long time, and I remembered how careful we had to be during that period of time. The guys were really a major threat to us for a while.
Yeah, and I'm a father now. I've got twin boys that are 20 years old, and I can only imagine what I would do if my kids' lives were threatened, much less if I saw my wife getting beaten. I can't imagine what he went through.
When you look at it from the standpoint of a father, you're looking at the possibility of losing your family.
When I was in school, most people avoided me at the time because they didn't want anything to do with it. But we would get calls. We'd get anonymous calls.
But it was a very frightening time, too, because we kept getting rumors back from your school as to what they were up to next. They're going to firebomb the house, or were they going to catch you out somewhere?
And the one guy that stuck by me was Jim. In fact, Jim and I became best friends during this. And he would come over, and he got very, very close to my family during all of this.
Your dad's a big jokester. Your mom's always positive, right? Your dad wasn't joking. He wasn't cutting up or anything. Your mom was just dead serious. I remember getting in the house and hearing it, okay, what's going on from your dad and your mom's side? And I said, what are our options? And I can remember talking with your dad about, if you were going to try to break into this house, where would you come?
It's really weird. Your home is where you feel most comfortable, where you feel at ease. And yet, in our house, it was really weird to arm it. We had guns all over the place, and we had to plan how to repel attacks.
We had kind of a major nuisance problem. We did carry guns in our cars during that period of time, and I carried a short barrel 12 gauge police shotgun with me, which I had owned for a while.
I also remember talking with them about if they, and I was just thinking about if they threw like fire bombs or whatever, Molotov cocktails or whatever, then what? Where do we get out? Which we talked about, back out your room, the back porch, out down the back. Just thinking about sort of different scenarios.
And I was really close to both my parents. Whenever I would go out at night, I'd always stop, and their bedroom was right next to the side door where I would enter from. And I'd always stop in and tell them about my evening, what was going on, who I saw. Dad was usually half asleep or totally asleep. Mom was always up waiting for me. And the night of that first big attack, I remember I was kind of breathless, and I stopped in, and I was just trying to tell them what had happened, and we heard all this noise out front. So I never got a chance to tell them before they were embroiled in it.
What had happened that night, I heard yelling at the front door, and as I remember, either my wife Norma or Mark yelled out to me that, Ted, the gang is here, the guys are here, and they're yelling at Mom, and apparently when he yelled that, the guys decided to run away from the front door. So I grabbed a robe, but I had bad eyesight. I didn't have my glasses or anything, and I was wearing only my underwear under the robe, and I ran out the side door of the house, ran around the house, and ran to the front of our house. We're on a corner street. And when I was getting close to the truck, the guys were running to a pickup truck that was running and parked in front of the house. Two guys were sitting in the front seat. One was already in the back of their pickup truck, and I ran up and caught the truck just as it was pulling away, reached up and grabbed the first guy that I could reach and yanked him out of the truck. And as I remember, I was I had him by, as I remember, his left arm with my left hand, and I reached under his left arm and grabbed the underside of his triceps on his right arm, right up under the armpit, and latched onto it. He was relatively muscular, but he had enough of a muscle that I was able to actually grab it and hang on to it, and I hung on to it with a very, very tight grip. And the reason that's pertinent is because Steve Pastor, the guy that I caught, showed the bruises on him as to how I had, quote unquote, beaten him. Well, I didn't beat him. In fact, I was very tempted to. But the point is, I got him out of the truck, and he was screaming at me the entire time, telling me that I'm gonna get your son. We're gonna get your son. We're gonna beat him to a pulp. And we're going to get your wife, and we're going to beat her to a pulp, and we're going to bring both of them back in bloody sacks. And this was filled with curse words at a rate that was unreal. I don't know enough about how people act under drugs, but it was almost as if he was so very high on something that he couldn't control his rate of speech. So and I make it sound like it's a short period of time, but this must have been a 10-minute, 15-minute encounter with this kid screaming in my face and trying to get away. Not trying that hard, though, but I wasn't about to let him go. Yes, I was not very well protected, but nevertheless, there was no way this kid was going to get out of my grasp, who was standing there threatening the family.
So, there were a lot of guys that were always after me, but there were two ringleaders, Perry and Steve. And even though everything started with Perry, it was directly between he and I, and he brought everyone else in on it. My dad always talked about Steve, because Steve's the one that he had his confrontation with. Steve was the one who was smacking him around when out in the street that first night.
I was impressed with Steve Pastor in a way, because I had never heard a guy think so fast with such a long string of dirty, threatening language in my life. I mean, it was neurotic. It wasn't human. It wasn't normal at all. It was way beyond anything I'd ever heard before. And of course, I wasn't going to let this nutcase loose.
Right.
I was not about to let him loose.
Those guys, they have no idea how close they got to dying. I had no idea how close they were to dying. Dad didn't admit to me for over 20 years what he was planning. I had no idea.
That's why we got guns in the family, which we had not had before. I was even in the building business, and I always thought guns would be a good idea to protect my materials on the job sites, but now suddenly I'm protecting my family by the same guns.
Yeah.
That was a tough situation.
Yeah.
But I really very quickly got to a point where it looked like it was serious enough that I was actually going to try to do something about it. If it got bad, I was going to take care of those kids, one way or the other. I didn't care what it was going to be.
Yeah, and you didn't tell me that for like 15 or 20 years afterwards. You never mentioned it.
I was putting together a few devices where if I ran into them, I could take care of them. And if it came into a confrontation, my intent was they didn't come out of it alive. That was my intention.
What stopped you from getting rid of them?
Because we made some progress with Ogden. and we went to court, and it looked like that was working. So I kind of shut down my thoughts. But I actually had made a couple of little devices that I was going to carry with me, and I figured that anything that I could wrap up in my hand that had not blades, but you can have a steel fist and it'd be very dangerous.
Yeah.
especially if you have a poker or a hard thing on the other end of it. It was something I slipped my fist into, and I could just have it in my pocket. And if I saw them, I just slipped my hand into it. And my whole point was that it was going to be heavy enough that if I smash them in the face, it's going to bust some bones, and that was my whole point. Well, those will help, but I was looking for something that would, number one, protect my hand and be deadly. I wasn't playing a game, but I didn't want to do it with a gun because, number one, I think I had one, but those can be traced, and I wasn't playing games.
And but that's all in protection of the family. And I was also kind of half planning about how I would resolve the situation and then just leave and wipe my hands of it and not worry about it anymore after that.
Yeah.
So
in my book and in some interviews, I've talked about how my art got really dark during all of it. What I was going through came out in my artwork. The same thing with my dad. My dad was a musician, so when he was in college, he had his own band. In fact, he started in a band when he was 13. So he plays a lot of different instruments, but the piano is the thing he feels most comfortable on. And before the events, Mom and I would dance around. He'd play every night, and for him, polkas were fun, and he played a lot of lighthearted stuff. But as things went on, his music got darker. He didn't play as much. He'd get frustrated with it at times and slam down on the keys. But he started playing some dark music. Yeah, the trials, I was nervous before the trials. I mean, look, we knew we were in the right. We knew we had everything going on, but would we win? If we lost, things are going to get a lot worse. So I was nervous. Dad didn't look at it that way. Dad used those opportunities to be in front of all those guys in the gang to make an impression.
I can still remember intentionally dressing up so that I would look a little tougher than I normally was.
Yeah.
And in fact, nowadays, I'm on Plavix, so I have these little spots on my arms, but it kind of reminds me of Pastor, the
bruising.
Pastor. Yeah, because I had grabbed him up under his arm. I had kind of had him on an arm bar on the other side, of course.
Right.
And I was not going to let go. A little SOB. I wanted so badly to swing him down and smash his face or head into the ground.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I had him under control, so I figured that might be enough for now.
Yeah, he always stood by me. There were a lot of opportunities. The school offered to put me in another school, when to call the police. Dad let me make all the final decisions. I was still working with him. He still sent me out to the job sites. I was pretty safe out there. But he supported my decisions 100% the whole way. I was always able to count on him, and that was key. I mean, I had a hard time through it, but I got through it.